reporting from all of this is people who have been trying to bring up his own credentials, trying to build a portfolio for himself. He kept getting shot down. Attorney General, then Senator Sessions, apparently shot this down and said, according to the New York Times, I hope this is never discussed again. Yet if you continue to go out there and do this, at the end of the day, though, the only collusion we have in the campaign with Russians is the Clintons.
But I just want to get your position clear in my mind. So your explanation is that he was too low level or that he was too incompetent? What's your, I don't understand your
I wasn't
position.
in the meeting. All I can tell you is that...
Right, but Jeff Sessions, who was neither incompetent nor low level, it got all the way to Jeff Sessions, this pitch, this idea that he would use his Russia context to put Donald Trump in a room with Vladimir
I don't know if that's the way. I don't know if that's the way it was phrased. I was not in the meeting. I've read a lot of the
well, no one with Jeff Sessions is denying that Jeff Sessions nixed a meeting.
But what I have read in public reporting from many outlets is that his story has varied between setting up a meeting to establish better contacts. There have been discussions of dirt. There have been discussions of all of these things. We don't know what was actually pitched in the meeting to just say that I've had contact with somebody who would like to set up a meeting with Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump going forward. I don't know what was, but it was immediately killed. No, because I was not in that meeting.
You don't know that it was immediately killed. You just said you weren't there. You don't,
no. But what was reported by the New York Times was that Jeff Sessions said, we're not going to do that.
But you just said he was low level. I mean, by the time it got, would you agree that Jeff Sessions was pretty high level?
I'm saying that Jeff Sessions was high level.
And you said that George was pretty low level, right? So you don't know who it was bounced off of before it got to Jeff Sessions, do you?
No, what we're talking about was that meeting on the 31st,
right, but
which
you
is where
just
it was
asserted
reported.
that the first time it was bounced up, it was rejected. You don't know.
I don't know that.
Right.
What I was saying is that if it was brought up on the 31st, it was immediately shut down according to what the New York Times
Right, but you don't know
reported.
if that was the first time it was suggested.
Neither do you. No
or the
one does.
10th. Well, we know that Papadopoulos, we know Bob Mueller knows.
Yep.
Well, we don't know what Bob Mueller knows. We also know that so far there has been no evidence of any kind of collusion between the Trump campaign.
Why do you keep
and
saying that?
Russia.
How do you know?
Has there been any evidence? Well, we were supposed to be dealing in news here.
Bob
facts,
Mueller
not
is
speculation.
But why are you so eager to get ahead of Bob? Do you trust Bob Mueller?
I'm not going to make a judgment on Bob Mueller.
You don't know if you can trust Bob. He's the former FBI director after 9/11 who prevented a.
He will make his determination.
Yes or no? Do you trust Bob Mueller?
I would trust the process to play out the way it's meant to be played out.
Why
right
can't
now,
you say that you trust a former FBI director who worked for Republicans and Democrats and kept this country safe after the worst terror attacks on our soil? You can't say you trust Bob Mueller?
It's not my job to come here and say who
I hope they're paying you a lot of
trust.
money. Eli Stokols, what is sustainable about this position that a Trump surrogate can't say they trust Bob Mueller?
Well, I don't want to arbitrate between Mark's position and not. I think that one of the things
but this isn't the White House's current position. Sarah Huckabee Sanders took to the podium yesterday and said there were no plans to fire.
But there are other folks putting bugs in the president's ears saying, I mean, if this goes forward and it goes forward in a way the president doesn't like, I mean, he already is upset with Sessions. He's already upset reportedly with Jared Kushner for the way that this has progressed and the fact that it has progressed at all. We know that from our reporting. If this goes further, it's possible that he will regret not terminating Mueller, that there are people that he's listening to who sort of enable those impulses from the outside, who say things like, I don't know if I'd listen to those lawyers if I were you. I don't know if those cabinet people have your back. I mean, you hear about what Bannon is trying to do when Bannon talks to this president. And it seems very much aimed at undermining his trust in the people that he has around him. So the president has a lot of things going on in his mind. But I think, Mark can come and say whatever he wants, and I'll take him at his word. But I just think that when you talk about going back to these meetings that happened during the campaign, my reporting is that this was a campaign that was basically a cult of personality operation, and Donald Trump is in the White House now because of it. But a lot of these things, and Sarah Sanders admitted as much at the press briefing on Monday when she said, this thing, they met one time, they didn't really do anything. Okay, the foreign policy team that was rolled out when they said, George Papadopoulos, the kid with Model UN on his resume, he's our foreign policy guy.
Which may or may not be true.
Sarah Sanders basically said that they just did this whole thing, this whole foreign policy team for the Instagram, because they needed to make it look like they had a team. They put the picture that we have out there is from Instagram. Same thing with Sam Clovis being in a position of authority above Papadopoulos to sign off on these things. These were people who were put in these positions because of their loyalty to the president, not because of an expertise or any experience in dealing with these things, and likely without much knowledge about the conversations they were having in that moment, and seemingly very little consideration that they would now be a matter of huge importance to perhaps the survival of the presidency.
Someone would have pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Steve Schmidt, let me read you something. We've worked on a few campaigns, and here's the description in the New York Times about what Eli's talking about, the Donald Trump foreign policy team. Ongoing Trump migraine, his initial foreign policy team. Mr. Trump's surprise march to the nomination had left the party's establishment openly questioning whether he had the foreign policy experience and was too much of a loose cannon to be entrusted with the presidency. Mr. Trump's solution was to cobble together a list of men who were almost immediately written off as a collection of fringe thinkers and has-beens and unknowns in Washington foreign policy circles. Some from that group have now created far deeper problems for Mr. Trump, providing federal and congressional investigators with evidence of suspicious interactions with Russian officials and their emissaries. Steve?
Well, I want to address something very directly that Mark said about that there's no evidence of collusion, and of course that's not true. The chairman of the campaign, now under indictment, Paul Manafort,
for nothing that had anything to do with
Donald Trump Jr.
That was back
and Jared Kushner. Don't interrupt me. I'm talking. Donald Trump Jr. met at the invitation of Russian nationals in an email that was titled, you know, essentially from the Russian government to get dirt on the Democratic nominee for president of the United States.
And Hillary Clinton
from the vice president.
Hang on, Mark. We'll let you respond.
In every instance, from the vice president to the attorney general to the press secretary, the press secretaries, every single person around this administration, when asked a direct question about contacts with Russians on this issue, has lied about it 100% of the time, and the lie is unraveled. And with regard to the uranium deal in the dossier, I think that what you're engaged and involved in here is an absolute premeditated misinformation campaign designed to spin and mislead the American people. This whole charge of collusion with regard to the Democrats is complete and total fantasyland nonsense talk that is propagated on Fox News, propagated in the conservative media entertainment
in the Washington
complex,
Post,
and you're not being honest about it in the representations that you're making.
Steve, here are the facts that we know that started with the Washington Post. I think you've probably heard of them, not Fox News. It started with the Clinton campaign paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to Fusion GPS, which went out and hired a foreign operative who, Brian Fallon, Hillary Clinton's former spokesperson, said, I would have gone out and helped him if I could have. They went on and then worked with Kremlin-tied connections to provide misinformation about the then candidate, later president-elect of the United States, and to make matters worse, the Hillary Clinton campaign, through their operatives, peddled this trash.
Mark,
to the American people starting last
nonsense.
Mark,
just nonsense.
Hey. Mark, I will call some friends over at Fox and try to get you a booking, but we're not going to peddle. That's not true. And all we're asking you, listen, we appreciate that you come here and speak on behalf of Donald Trump, but why can't you say that we don't know if, I mean, we know there was attempted collusion. If it's not a crime, why are you so defensive about it?
Well, I'm not being defensive.
You are madly defensive. You're about to jump through the camera and punch.
Well, when I get called being untrustworthy.
Well, why can't you say that it's possible that collusion took place? It's probably going to end up that they tried and were incompetent colluders. But if it's not a crime, why are you guys? Why is it such a raw nerve for you guys?
Well, but here's the question. Here's the double standard. So you talk about these issues here, which you say amount to collusion, but the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee go out and pay for this and peddle it, and that's just opposition research.
You don't know that we haven't covered that story. Ken Delaney is with us, and we have covered uranium.
But it's considered opposition research and brushed away.
I'll send an email over to friends at Fox, and you can peddle your propaganda there. A yes or no question. Are you aware of anybody, as anyone that covers the White House is, that is concerned of what George Papadopoulos may have shared since he pled guilty in July? Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
I'm not aware of anybody.
You're not aware of anybody that's concerned about what George Papadopoulos meant?
No.
And you're telling the truth? I mean, I've heard 4 people that are worried that this is a climb the ladder process. I mean, these are people that spoke privately and off the record.
Right now, all we have indictments that have nothing to do with the President of the United States and the White House.
I'm not asking about the President. I'm asking about your former colleagues, the staffers, the 6 names that were on Bob Mueller's list of people he wants to interview about a lie that was told, that was dictated by the President from aboard Air Force One. Have you not talked to anyone on that list this week?
That's a completely different question.
I asked you if anybody was worried about their own leaks. legal liabilities? Yes or no? I'm determining whether or not you're going to come on this show and tell me the truth or lie. And it's up to you.
I am sure that everyone that is taking the appropriate necessary steps that they have to legally, that is not something we talk about in the White House.
You don't know if any of your former friends are worried.